The interview ended with Prince Julian Ashbourne standing beside an empty chair, one hand already reaching for the microphone clipped to his jacket. Across from him, veteran broadcaster Gareth Vale did not move. He did not raise his voice. He did not tell Julian to sit down. He did not even look surprised. He simply asked one final question. If every person who challenges your version becomes an enemy, how would you ever know when they were right? Julian froze. For almost 5 seconds, neither man spoke. The studio audience had stopped moving. Gareth waited. Julian looked toward the cameras, then toward the producer standing just beyond them. Finally, he turned back. This is precisely the kind of hostile ambush I was warned about. Gareth nodded once. Which question was hostile? Julian stared at him. Gareth continued. The company timeline? No answer. The charity numbers? Silence, the staff turnover? Julian's jaw tightened. The private conversations you published? Julian reached for the microphone. Gareth leaned back. Or that one. Julian removed the microphone. I think we're finished. If that's your decision. It is. Julian placed the microphone on the table, then walked out. No applause followed him. No one knew whether they were supposed to clap. And Gareth Vale, who had spent 31 years interviewing prime ministers, billionaires, actors, generals, and people who believed preparation meant memorizing 3 answers, simply looked at the empty chair. It always gets called hostile when the adjectives stop working. That was the clip that spread by morning. But the clash had started 24 minutes earlier with a compliment. The Current Line studio had seen almost every type of television confrontation. Guests who shouted. Guests who cried. Guests who demanded commercial breaks. Guests who threatened producers. Gareth had learned long ago that none of those moments mattered unless the audience understood how the conversation got there. Prince Julian arrived just after 7. Dark blue suit. White shirt. No tie. The deliberate uniform of a man who wanted to look important without looking institutional. He was promoting a new documentary called Outside the Walls, a 4-part series about the life he had built after stepping away from the Ashbourne royal household. Its central message was simple. Julian wanted freedom. Freedom from palace expectations. Freedom from anonymous briefings. Freedom from people telling his story for him. Gareth opened warmly. I watched all 4 episodes. Julian smiled. That is either flattering or deeply concerning. The audience laughed. Gareth smiled. Episode 3 was longer than some marriages. Julian laughed with them. For several minutes, the atmosphere remained easy. They talked about California, fatherhood, British weather, the absurdity of royal protocol. Gareth asked whether Julian missed anything about palace life. The people. Not the buildings? Cold buildings, cold sandwiches. Another laugh. Then Gareth asked, You say repeatedly that leaving wasn't planned. It wasn't. You reached breaking point? Yes, and then left? Yes. Gareth glanced down at the desk. There was one folder beside him. Julian noticed it. Gareth noticed Julian noticing it. Neither acknowledged the moment. Gareth continued. Your documentary says you had no commercial plan. That's correct. Your media company was registered 4 months before you stepped away. Julian's smile disappeared. Preliminary structures existed. Structures? Yes. Company name? Yes. Lawyers? Yes. Banking arrangements? Some. Meetings with streaming companies? Julian paused. Exploratory meetings. Gareth nodded. That sounds like a plan. No, what does a plan require that you didn't have? Certainty. Gareth looked at him. Planning requires certainty? Julian leaned forward. No, obviously not in every context. So what did you mean? I mean, we were exploring options without knowing whether any of them would happen. That's fair. Julian relaxed slightly. Gareth looked down at the page. In episode 1, you say, We stepped away with absolutely nothing prepared. Julian's expression tightened. That was an emotional description. Of a logistical claim? No. Gareth waited. Julian continued. It means psychologically we felt completely unprepared. Then why mention preparation? Julian stared. Gareth shrugged slightly. You could have said you felt frightened. We did. Uncertain, yes. Overwhelmed, yes. All understandable. Gareth tapped the page, but nothing prepared as a factual sentence. Julian exhaled. This is what happens when people take documentary narration and treat it like testimony. Gareth nodded. Should documentary narration not be accurate? It was accurate. You had a company. We had paperwork, lawyers, exploratory, streaming meetings. Exploratory, Gareth leaned back. Everything becomes exploratory after the date appears. The audience reacted softly. Julian looked toward them. Gareth closed the first page. Let's move on. The second subject was Julian's Veterans Foundation. The Horizon Veterans Trust had become one of the most visible parts of his post-royal identity. Julian spoke passionately about military service, trauma, mental health, young veterans who returned from conflict and discovered the attention vanished when the uniform came off. Gareth listened. Seriously, no jokes. Then he asked, how many treatment programs does Horizon currently fund? Julian paused. We work through a broad partnership network. How many? Different levels of support exist. Gareth waited. Julian finally said, 6 main partnerships. Active? Yes. Gareth looked at the document. 3 stopped accepting new participants last quarter. Julian's expression changed. They're restructuring. So 3 active? 3 fully active. Gareth nodded. How many veterans received direct treatment last year? I don't carry every figure. 462, that sounds right. Your fundraising film says thousands. Julian leaned back. Thousands engage with our resources. Treatment? No, broader engagement. Website visits? In part. Newsletter? In part. Social media? Among other things. Gareth paused. So 462 received direct treatment. Julian looked irritated. You're trying to make that sound insignificant. No, Gareth's voice stayed flat. It sounds significant. Julian stopped. Gareth continued. That's why I'm asking why the film says thousands. Because thousands benefit from the broader ecosystem. Benefit how? Information, awareness, referral pathways. Do you measure outcomes? Yes, what are they? Julian hesitated. That would require more detail than we have time for. Gareth glanced at the clock. We have 26 minutes. The audience laughed. Julian did not. I mean, these metrics require context. Gareth nodded. Context, yes. What context turns 462 into thousands? Julian's jaw tightened. That isn't what I said. You just said thousands benefit. They do. Measured? Not everything meaningful is captured in numbers. Gareth paused. You just told people your impact was measurable. Julian looked at him. Impact is measurable in multiple ways. Name one. Silence. Gareth waited. Julian said, I think reducing humanitarian work to a numerical argument is beneath the seriousness of the issue. Gareth's expression barely changed. The number came from your annual report. Silence. Gareth closed the second page. The third subject was travel. Julian's documentary devoted almost an entire episode to the journey that supposedly changed his life. According to the film, he flew to Belhaven after an explosive confrontation inside the royal household. The voiceover described the trip as spontaneous, an escape, a moment when Julian realized there was no going back. Gareth asked, when was Belhaven booked? Julian stared at him. I don't remember. Roughly, days before. Gareth looked at the paper. You were announced at the Belhaven Leadership Forum 3 weeks earlier. Julian's posture changed. That event was already scheduled, so the trip was scheduled. The professional portion. Same flight? Yes. Same dates? Broadly, same hotel? Julian sighed. Yes, Gareth nodded. Then the trip wasn't spontaneous. The decision I made during it was. That I understand. Julian waited. Gareth continued. But your documentary says the confrontation caused you to leave for Belhaven. Emotionally, it did. You were already leaving. Physically, Gareth paused. The audience became quiet. Julian continued. Human beings don't experience important events as spreadsheets. No, Gareth nodded. But editors do. A few laughs. Julian looked irritated. Gareth continued. So was the sequence changed because it made better television? No, why present a planned journey as an emergency departure? Because that was how it felt. Gareth stared at him. How something feels and what happened are different categories. Julian's voice sharpened. You weren't there. No, you don't know what that week was like. No, you don't understand the pressure. No, Gareth paused. But none of those things changed when the plane was booked. Silence. Julian looked down. Gareth waited. Then Julian said, You are deliberately stripping emotional events of context. Gareth nodded. There's that word again. Julian frowned. What? Context, because context matters. I agree. Gareth closed the page. That's why I keep asking you for it. The audience murmured. The fourth subject was staff. Julian's production company, Ember House, had been promoted as the opposite of palace culture. No rigid hierarchy. No intimidating senior structure. No employees afraid to speak. Julian had described it as a workplace built around emotional safety and mutual respect. Gareth quoted him. You said, good leadership means creating an environment where the truth can travel upward. Julian nodded. I still believe that. How many senior staff members have left Ember House in 3 years? Julian's expression closed. I don't know. 15 companies have turnover. They do. Especially startups. Yes, especially companies under intense public scrutiny. Absolutely, Gareth nodded. Why did 15 leave? I can't discuss confidential employee matters. Fine, Julian seemed surprised. Gareth put the document down. What did you change after they left? Julian paused. Internally? In yourself. Julian stared. We're constantly improving. How? Communication structures. What changed? We developed clearer operational frameworks. Gareth blinked. Operational frameworks. Yes, what does that mean? It means improving channels between leadership and different teams. How? Julian's jaw tightened. More structured reporting. Gareth nodded. Good. Julian looked almost confused. That's specific. Silence? Did it work? We believe so. Has turnover fallen? Yes, then that seems worth saying. Julian relaxed slightly. Gareth waited a beat. What did you personally get wrong? The relaxation vanished. Excuse me? You changed the reporting structure. Yes, what did you do that contributed to the problem? Julian's face hardened. That question assumes I caused the turnover. No, it clearly does. It assumes you were part of the workplace. Julian said nothing. Gareth continued. 15 senior people leave. Silence. Maybe all 15 were wrong. Julian stared. Maybe. Another pause. But if you're asking staff to examine their performance, did you examine yours? Of course. What did you find? Julian looked toward the cameras. Gareth waited. I think leadership can always improve. That's a slogan. Julian's eyes narrowed. Name one thing. Silence, 1 second. 3, 5, Julian finally said I could delegate more. Gareth nodded. There. Julian looked at him. That wasn't fatal. A few people laughed. Gareth continued. You gave me an answer. Julian's expression remained guarded. Why is that so difficult? I don't accept your premise that it is. Gareth nodded. Fair enough. Then came family. This was the subject Julian's team had asked Gareth to handle carefully. His older brother, Crown Prince Alexander, had not publicly responded to most of Julian's claims. Julian, meanwhile, had written about private arguments between them, personal conversations, family confrontations, moments that Alexander had never confirmed. Gareth began simply. You say reconciliation is still possible. I hope so. You love your brother. Very much. Do you speak? Julian's face changed. I'm not discussing current private communication. Fair. Julian looked surprised again. Gareth continued. Should private family conversations stay private? Generally. Why generally? Because sometimes speaking is necessary. Who decides? The person telling their experience. Gareth nodded. So when you published conversations with Alexander, that was your experience? Yes, if Alexander publishes private conversations with you? Julian hesitated. It would depend. On? What he shared. Why he shared it. Gareth leaned back. Why does his privacy rule require a motive test? Julian frowned. That's not what I said. You published because you believed your purpose justified it. Yes, he publishes because he believes his purpose justifies it. That's hypothetical. Of course. Gareth nodded. I'm testing the principle. Julian's voice sharpened. Families are more complicated than principles. Then why invoke principles when defending the book? Julian stared. Gareth continued. You said silence protects unhealthy systems. Sometimes it does. So disclosure can be moral. Yes, if he discloses? Again, it depends on context. Gareth nodded slowly. Context. Julian looked frustrated. Yes, Gareth, context. The company needed context. The charity needed context. The travel story needed context. The staff turnover needed context. The family disclosures need context. Julian leaned forward because adult life is complicated. I agree. Gareth closed the folder. No more documents. Julian stopped. Gareth moved the folder away. No dates. Silence, no foundation. Another pause. No staff. Julian watched him. No brother. Gareth folded his hands. One question. Julian stared. Gareth asked, who is allowed to tell you that you're wrong? Julian blinked. That's absurd. Why? I have plenty of people who challenge me. Good, my wife. Good, my friends. Good advisors. Gareth nodded. Name one thing they changed your mind about. Julian stared. Recently? Anytime. Julian paused. I've changed my mind about countless things. One silence. Gareth waited. Julian looked annoyed. This feels performative. You're on television. The audience laughed. Gareth did not. Give me a boring example. Julian looked away. Gareth continued. Food, silence, a business decision. Julian's lips tightened. A sentence in the documentary. Nothing, something. Julian turned back. I don't think I owe you an audit of my personal growth. You don't. Gareth nodded. But you've spent years asking everyone around you to conduct one. The audience quieted. The institution should examine itself. Julian said nothing. The press should examine itself. Silence. Your family should examine itself. Julian shifted. Your former advisors should examine themselves. Gareth leaned forward slightly. When does the examination reach you? Julian's face hardened. I have acknowledged mistakes. Name one. Silence. There it was. No document to dispute. No statistic to contextualize. No timeline to reinterpret. Just one invitation. Julian looked toward the producer. Then back toward Gareth. This is an extraordinarily hostile way to conduct an interview. Gareth stayed still. Which question was hostile? Julian shook his head. It's the entire framing. The company? No answer. The charity? Julian's jaw tightened. The travel timeline? Silence? The employees? Julian reached for the microphone. The family? Gareth paused. Or asking whether you can be wrong? Julian stood. The audience gasped. I think we're finished. If that's your decision, it is. Julian removed the microphone. Gareth did not stop him. This is exactly why people lose trust in media. Gareth nodded. Maybe. You take complicated experiences and reduce them to confrontation. Sometimes, you've made no effort to understand what I went through. Gareth looked at him. You're right. Julian stopped. I don't know what you went through. Silence. I don't know what happened inside your family. Another pause. I don't know whether your critics are fair. Gareth gestured toward the chair. That's why I asked questions. Julian stared. And every time the question became uncomfortable, the discomfort became evidence that the question was wrong. That's your interpretation. Fine, Gareth nodded. Give me yours. Julian said nothing. Gareth continued. If every person who challenges your version becomes an enemy, how would you ever know when they were right? Julian froze. 5 seconds. This is precisely the kind of hostile ambush I was warned about. Gareth nodded. Which question was hostile? Julian removed the microphone. I'm done. If that's what you want. Julian placed it on the desk, then looked directly at Gareth. You should think carefully about whether humiliating a guest is journalism. Gareth paused. I didn't ask you to humiliate yourself. Julian's face reddened. I asked you for one mistake. Silence. That should have been the easiest question of the night. Julian turned, walked toward the side of the studio. Nobody stopped him. The curtain closed behind him. The audience began to clap. Gareth immediately raised one hand. No, the clapping stopped. He has every right to leave. Gareth looked at the empty chair. And every right not to answer. He paused. But refusing the question isn't the same as disproving it. After the break, senior correspondent Rachel Dorn joined Gareth. She sat in Julian's chair. That escalated. Gareth exhaled. Yes, did you expect him to leave? No. Did you intend to corner him? Gareth thought about it. I intended to remove the exits from the answer. Rachel frowned. Explain. The company date had an explanation. Exploration. The charity numbers had one. Broader impact. The travel timeline. Emotional truth. The staff turnover. Normal organizational change. The family disclosures. Context. Gareth nodded. Every individual answer could be legitimate. Rachel looked at him. But? At some point, the pattern becomes the question. What pattern? Gareth looked toward the camera. Responsibility always seemed to travel outward. By midnight, the most shared clips were not of Prince Julian leaving. They were smaller moments. Why not say that? What context turns 462 into thousands? The plane was already booked. What did you personally get wrong? Who is allowed to tell you that you're wrong? And finally, that should have been the easiest question of the night. Julian's office issued a statement the following morning. It accused the current line of constructing a hostile interrogation through selective facts and deliberately reductive framing. Gareth read part of it on air the next evening. Then he put it down. Selective facts. He nodded. If one of our facts is wrong, tell us. A pause. We'll correct it. The audience remained silent. If the company registration date is wrong, correct it. If the foundation figures are wrong, correct them. If the Belhaven schedule is wrong, correct it. If the staff number is wrong, correct it. Gareth leaned forward. But calling a fact selective doesn't make it false. Another pause. And calling a question hostile doesn't answer it. The audience applauded. Gareth raised one hand. There's something else. They quieted. I don't know Prince Julian. He gestured toward the previous night's empty chair. He may be generous. He may be a good father. He may be right about things that happened to him. All of that can be true. Gareth paused. And he can still be wrong sometimes. Another pause. So can I. That caught the audience. Gareth smiled faintly. I've been wrong publicly for 31 years. A little laughter. Very efficiently. More laughter. Then he became serious again. The point of accountability isn't never being wrong. He looked directly into the camera. It's being able to survive the sentence. I got that wrong. Silence. If those 4 words feel like humiliation, Gareth paused. You may have built your identity around being right. And that was why the fictional interview lasted longer in public memory than the walkout itself. Not because a prince had left a television studio, not because a broadcaster had defeated him, but because beneath every document, every argument, and every uncomfortable pause was one simple question. Can the person demanding accountability from everyone else tolerate accountability when it reaches him? Prince Julian had spent years asking institutions to answer difficult questions. That night, Gareth Vale gave one back. Julian chose not to answer it. And then the interview ended.